I know it's a couple minutes after 10, and you're thinking Cody may still be here, and Ruth will not, and Jamie will not?
Ruth actually said she was going to be
Okay.
here. We weren't unsure about Cody, but Jamie will not because he's out of town.
Okay. Do we have a quorum?
I believe we do.
So I say we go ahead and start the meeting, and if the late people show up, when they walk in the room, I want to hear a loud boo. Boo!
Are you gonna shame them?
We're going to shame them.
Okay.
That'll teach them. So,
Oh, there's Ruth.
call this meeting to order. 1, 2, 3.
We just now got started.
That's funny. That was my first order of business in my budget meeting. Oh, yeah. That's funny. Looks like the first thing we do is a roll call.
Buckley. Here. Denham. Here. Dobbins.
Here.
Benton. Melton.
Here.
Pinkley. Romine. Here. Whitus. Yancey. Here. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. I want to welcome our new board members to this committee, and the public appointments will attend our next meeting. Looks like the first item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the Finance Committee.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second has been made. Is there a vote? Are we doing just a roll call vote or an oral vote?
I'll do roll call.
Okay.
Buckley.
Yes.
Denham.
Yes.
Dobbins.
Yes.
Milton.
Yes.
Romine.
Yes.
Yancey.
Here, yes.
Okay, yeas have it. Moving on, next agenda item is our staff reports.
Okay, so I asked Melissa to give me a few minutes this morning because I had expected a little bit of new ones. So I wanted to explain, for those of you, most of you have already heard all of this all the time, but for the ones who haven't been as involved in it, it might be helpful just to talk about the different types of taxes and what we have and why. So we have a sales tax, which is a 1%, and Ruth, I'm sure you know all of this, but if I am repetitive, just tell me, be quiet, and let's move on. Stan will do that.
Be quiet, let's move on.
Okay.
Jimmy, one suggestion is if you would make this brief, because at the next meeting
Yes.
with the new people, they'll want a thorough.
Okay, well, I don't need to do this, then I'll just kick Melissa right into doing her reports, and we'll move on. How about that?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Okay. Okay, so this month I am presenting our April receipts. Just keep in mind that most of this is going to be February business activity. Let me scroll in just a little bit here. Okay, so our receipts for the month were up 24.7% compared to the same period the year before. So just keep in mind, at this point, we are still at pre-COVID numbers. We were not to the point where we had limited business activity. So we will look at the reports next month to have a better idea of what is actually occurring out there in as far as business activity goes.
Excuse me, Melissa, would you go back up there? That's important to hear, that these numbers are before we had any COVID issues, and we're comparing it to February of last year. And if you look across the line, for I guess that would be, well, it's the February number, 631,000 in February of 2021. And you look across, 506, 480, 555, 550, 535, 516, that is very impressive. That's a great number. Thank you, Melissa.
Welcome. And just as a reference, one of the other things that we will be looking at is actually putting this back into the business activity month. So we will be leaning heavily on the rolling 12, where we actually go back to the month that the businesses were making these tax receipts. So we have some idea, was it actually business activity in February? Was it prior period payments? So there's a couple different things that we have to consider when we're looking at this to have a full picture.
Regarding COVID, one of the things that we're doing too is to look at the COVID period year over year. So for example, like the May all the way through for a full 12 months, which is rolling 12, but we're not there yet. So one of the things that we've done, and John and I have talked about this a lot, is going back and putting it in COVID time to see how down we actually are as a result of COVID. And we did that. We're still about 33% down as a result of the COVID once we get there. But we'll be keeping y'all up to date on that too, because it's important. If you remember last year during the COVID financial piece, that we had estimated like 45% down, and we had said for every about 5 to 6 months, it was going to take us a month to recover. And that's what we're looking at, is to see, are we actually ahead? Are we pacing ahead? I would safely say for this year, we are pacing ahead of our assumptions, which is really good. We were hopeful for that. And we've had a great spring break this year, as everybody knows that. So that's one of the other things that in our department that we're looking at and we're keeping track of, so that y'all can see, okay, based on our assumptions last year and with the pandemic and everything, how are we tracing to catch up and move ahead of where we actually were prior to pandemic?
And just to follow up on that, I'll be curious as we go through the year, to not only compare the numbers to 2020, the COVID year, but I'd also like to compare them to 2019. 19 was a record year.
Absolutely.
So I'd be anxious to see how that compares.
What we did when John and I were looking at it is we went from 2018 for the same time period, 2019, 2020, so that you could gauge that, which is what I think you're looking at. And the rolling 12 really does a good job of that. We're just not there yet.
Yeah.
So we wanted to go backwards to see what we were up against.
Thank you very much.
We forgot to boo someone that just showed up.
Oh, it's not too late. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
We're going with public shaming.
So just real quickly, when we're looking at the bottom half of this report, we are still down 4.7% year-to-date, though. You can see, however, most of that comes from earlier receipt months, where we were down January for November business activity, February for December. The next report here is going to be our 0.5% transportation sales tax. I just want to touch real quickly. Typically, we will tell you that when you're looking at this amount right here, it's going to be half of what our 1% sales tax was. You'll notice a little bit more of a difference this month than we have in previous months. Jamie had me reach out to the Department of Revenue and ask them why there was such a difference. And it came down to utilities. So when you are making your utility payments to Empire, Summit Natural Gas, you're paying a 1% sales tax, but you don't pay that 0.5% transportation and public safety on those utility sales. So there was just a little bit more of a difference. I would attribute most of it probably to the cold snap, but there may be some other issues that were going on there. So next month, we would expect that to be more consistent with the half of the 1%. On this one as well, year-to-date, we are down 5.4%. Your next report here is the 0.5% public safety sales tax. Again, it was up 19.8%. We do expect this to true up more to the 50% of the 1% again next month. And year-to-date, the public safety sales tax is down 5.4% to last year. Now, on our tourism tax receipts, for our new members, there we go. Okay. We were up 55.5% compared to last year. So the tourism tax is actually collected in-house. So we have a better idea compared to the sales tax, which is collected by the Missouri Department of Revenue and then distributed out to each local taxing entity. We have a better idea of, if this is for late payment or, we know that everything is being processed. So our cutoff date is the last day of each month. We make sure that every tourism tax return that is received in the department is processed by that date. So again, when you're looking at March receipts, this is February business activity. Year-to-date, tourism tax receipts are up 1.1% compared to the same period last year, or year-to-date last year. The final report here is tourism tax receipts broken out by category. So you can see that for the same month comparison, theaters were the only classification that were down, and year-to-date, only theaters and hotels and motels are down compared to last year. Great. Let me pull up the next report here. Oh, let me see here. There we go. Okay, so this is the report that I was referring to just a few moments ago. The rolling 12 actually puts business activity back in the month that it occurred. So at this point, we are looking at January receipts being up 16% compared to January of 2020. And there's a slight delay on this just because even on the last reports we reported it was mostly February business activity. We'll still receive a significant amount of February receipts in May. So there is just a 1 more month delay on this report. If I put it out there, it would not be an accurate picture of what February activity was. And just as a reference, I pulled the report that I presented last month. So when we were looking at December, last month it showed a decrease of 12.9%, and we go through and we update these on a monthly basis, so all of these amounts will continue to change as we receive more payments. The second page of this is a 12-month economic growth indicator. So right now we are looking at a decrease of 18.8%, this amount right here, over the last 12 months. So when Jamie was referring to getting a picture of the impact of COVID, this is one of the reports that we'll use heavily, so you can see that since we're going to be comparing through March, it's going to take a couple more months for us to get those numbers in and be able to report them. If anyone doesn't have any questions, I'll move on to the next report. Our unrestricted tax reports. So this column right here will take all of our city sales tax reports that I reported on the first report that I gave. We remove the sales that occurred in TIF districts, and this gives us a remaining amount of tax dollars that are actually spendable that will not go to repaying those bonds. So you can see that we, for the month, had an increase of $92,266. However, year to date, we are still at a decrease of $187,000. We do the same report for our tourism tax receipts. So again, this column will be the actual receipts that we have. And then adjusted for TIF, sorry, I don't know what happened there. We had an increase of almost $91,000 for the month, and year to date, we have a decrease of $158,000 in spendable dollars.
Just want to remind everybody, I know we're going through this quick, but if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate.
And finally, these are our budget reports. So what we do on this is we take the annual budget, we break it out based on a 5-year history of what we would expect to receive for each month. So you can see here that we would expect January to make up 10.7% of our tax receipts. So we are able to come out with a calculated budget for each month here. At this point, we are at 16.4% above what we would have expected to receive at this point.
One reason why we do this is because we are a heavily tourism populated city. A lot of cities, you know, the operational, you can divide by 12 and know month over month where you expect to sit. Tourism is a little bit harder to do that because you've got this going on, the hills and the valleys, and so we wanted to do that just so you have a good gauge as to where we are at this point in time during that month. I know I say that a lot, but I just want to keep reminding, a better benchmark for you is year over year point in time than just looking at where we're supposed to be budget-wise over a 12-month period for our city.
So that was for the general sales tax. The next report here is for our tourism tax receipts. So at this point, we are 81.2% above budget. So keep in mind that when Jamie did the budget for this year, you know, she was conservative because at that point, we didn't know what to expect for 2021. That concludes the tourism and sales tax reports. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hearing none, we can move on.
I will say I like the way it's trending.
Yes.
So the next one will be the monthly financial reports as of the end of March 31, 2021. And we'll just go through each of those funds. If you have questions, stop me. Sometimes I go too fast, sometimes I go too slow. I tend to look at Stan to gauge at the speed that I should go. Okay, so for general fund, we'll go through that really quickly. Just for general fund, it is the only unrestricted fund by definition that we have. All the other ones are special revenue or proprietary in nature. So this one is the one where most of our operations get recorded. Just as a brief explanation. So your revenues here, your revenues are still down to last year and the year over, the taxes and franchise, but we are making up some ground, and I expect that throughout the year, if we keep going like we have been going, we will catch up. So your license and permits, that involves your business license, your liquor license, your building permits, all of those things go in that category, and we are up to last year, which is good, down to the year before. Courts receipts continue to decline. Leases and rents, we are down, but if you recall, a large portion of that category is our West 76 leases. So like Whitewater, the ballparks, some of those other ones that we own the land that we rent that out. And we did adjust some of those leases last year, so that's where some of that drop will come from. Also, there's a base rent there, and then there's a 3% of sales. Some of those are 5%, so if their sales were down, that also will take into consideration in that category as well. Charges for services, it's about where we budgeted for those because those are some of the administrative charges and stuff that we have to budget for. And then the interest income, and everybody knows the rates are down. We are doing our best to keep that above where we anticipated that. And then your miscellaneous revenue. Some of the miscellaneous revenue is our P card rebate. We get 1.39%. Back 15 days after the month closes for everything we spend using our P card. So that's a portion of that. We have the vending machine revenue is in that. Some of the categories that are in that are, we don't ever know what we're gonna get back, so we typically don't depend on that, so we call that miscellaneous revenue. And then we'll go through your expenditures, and these are all the departments that are categorized in the general fund, and so you can take a look at those. Your expenditures are up to last year and the year before. We did a 3% merit raise. We did not do a COLA for this year, and then some insurance slightly, but that'll take account for your expenditures going up. If you look department over department, most of them are doing a really good job of keeping those expenditures down. Non-departmental categories, those are our social services. The health department is included in that. We also have, we did the demolition of some of those houses by the Housing Authority. That was included in that. Our lobbyist contract, that's what makes up those non-departmental expenditures. And then if you scroll down, Melissa, we had We included a box down here. So it makes the financials a bit smaller, so you might have to zoom in a little bit more, because we included this box, and remember last month I said, we'll do it based upon our understanding of what you're looking for, and then if you want us to change it somehow, let us know. But this is kind of a legend for the other sources category for the transfer outs and where those go and why. So it's basically a key. So if you look at that and say, oh, well, that's not really what we were asking for, or we want it to be done differently, just let us know. But this was our first effort at doing what we thought y'all were looking for.
Jamie,
Yes.
my initial thought is, and I don't know, I know we're trying to squeeze a lot onto one page, but the transfers out in the box. Yeah. It may be more clear if we could address the dollar amounts in each one of the categories. So we transferred out to the convention center X dollars, out to parks X, and then public safety X. We could include those dollar amounts of how much we're transferring in each of those categories.
Okay. Like up here in the actual other sources, do you want us, so we have like transfer to convention center, in the actual column it says 316. We can just drag that down to that box
No.
if you want.
I apologize, I didn't realize.
That's
they were
okay.
up there.
I'm just trying to draw the
Yeah.
connection
Yeah.
there.
Very good, thank you.
And some of these will be self-explanatory, some of these will not be, so we wanted to define it for you in that box, but anytime you want to know, I'll go through these very quickly for y'all. The tourism, the transfer in from tourism, that's a 2% admin fee that we get because we do all the tourism tax and the handling of that in-house to offset the financial staff for doing that. So that's what that is. The operating transfer to the convention center is to offset the losses and the subsidy there. Transfer out to the park fund, that's their subsidy to the park fund from the general fund. And that we did reduce that again this year by 25%, same way we did the public safety fund, due to kind of the unknowns for this year's budget. So you'll see that one there. The TIF ones are all of the monies that are coming in from the TIF and being transferred back out to our debt service funds to pay and to account for all of the TIF debt. And then really quickly, this operating transfer out to the TIF is the new TIF. However, we've got to be real careful with that because in that one TIF, there's only one specific business. So we've got to be really careful how we account for that one. Your public safety fund, that's your subsidy, the $5.7 million of which 25% has already come in because you're at your first quarter. And then your public safety fund, your code enforcement, that's to account for the code enforcement officers that transitioned from the planning department down to the police department to offset their expenses. I know I went through that really quickly, but if you have any questions, please ask. Yes, yes.
So just to clarify, the transfer out to the debts are transferred 50%, so, or 100%. The only 100% we have is the landing, is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay, the
yes.
others are all 50%?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
absolutely. And so that is a picture of the general fund. Unless you have any other questions, we can move on. I'm going to briefly touch on the public safety here, but I did another agenda item so that we could spend a little bit more detail defining that public safety funds for you on the next item. So I'll go through it very quickly, and then I'll circle back to it for the next line item on the agenda. Okay, so public safety, 1.3 million in revenues, this year versus last year of 1.5, and the prior year was pretty close. And mostly that is due to a decline in taxes and pandemic. You can see the expenditures for the public safety at 2.5 versus 2.4. And then if you look at 2019, there's a little bit of a caveat, and most of you know what this is, but in 2019, we had the expense of a new fire truck on there, and that was a little bit more than $1 million. So if you pull that one out, you can see a better trend there. Okay, and then you go down to your other financing sources, and you've got, again, we have a legend down at the bottom for you to look at. We tried to do that on every fund just to kind of clarify that for y'all. And then you've got 1.3 million in that versus 1.9 last year. And again, if you look, we hadn't hit the pandemic or changed our financials at this point in time last year. So we are at 5.7 in the subsidy. This year versus last year, we were still doing that 7.6, and then we changed it in May. So keep that in mind, it'll have decreased by then, okay? And you're sitting at an unreserved fund balance at the end of March of about a little more than 6 million. Yes, sir.
Jamie, just real quick for the new folks, I guess could you explain the 25 at the top for the expected 25%, or if you've already done that, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Up there at the budget, the
Yes,
little,
yes.
Melissa, will you scroll up,
Yeah.
please? That expect 25%, thank you. Those are the little things that I just glaze over. That expect 25% is because we are at the end of the first quarter. So in a typical budget, non-tourism, you would expect 25% of your expenditures to be gone, 25% of your revenues to have come in. So we put that up there so you can kind of gauge where we're supposed to be at in the year. And then I like to tell you, because we're a tourism town, look, benchmark it year over year, and that's why we did those other budget reports, so you would be able to see both sides of how we're supposed to be looking at it. Is that helpful? Okay. And then, again, we're going to circle back around to the public safety, and I'll go into it a lot more detail in just a little bit, so I'll glaze right through that unless you have any questions off the bat. Okay, so this is the Convention Center Fund. Revenues are at $585,000 versus last year $855,000, and the year before over $1 million. And then the expenditures are at $931,000 this year versus 1.1 last year and 1.3. And I'll keep saying this over and over. Last year is kind of a gauge that we tend to look at as a point in time, and you will see that when we get closer to May, actual May's activities, because you'll start seeing the changes and the differences in where we fall this year versus last year. So you look at your other financing sources, we have that transfer key down there at the bottom as well. And that transfer in is general fund subsidy of the $316,000. Another way for you all to check us is look at the transfer ins and outs. So general fund, we have a whole long list of what I just read for you is the transfer outs to this fund, or transfer outs to this fund, or transfer out to that fund. Well, if you really want to do that in-depth study, go to transfer out, says 316 on the convention center, then go to the convention center and make sure that there's a transfer in of the same 316,000. Because at the end of the year, we have to make sure that all those transfer ins and outs, they net to zero with the exception of the proprietary fund. So those will all be ways that you can go in and do an in-depth study on how it all works. Okay, is there any questions on the convention center? The marketing, Melissa, will you scroll up just a tad? Thank you. The operating transfer in to tourism, that's for their marketing dollars that they submit to us. They submit all their marketing expenses. We go through a process to determine to make sure they're actual marketing expenses. By definition, once they are, then we turn around and reimburse them for their up to $500,000 in any given year. So that's what that is for. Okay, we'll go on. Tourism tax. Revenues are mostly as a result of the tax monies coming in. You do have intergovernmental. That intergovernmental of $17,000 was the county sewer reimbursement for one of our projects out of the tourism fund. And then you have your interest income, and we're watching that as well. And then we'll go down to expenditures for the tourism. We have a legend down at the bottom as well, but just to recap, there's your administrative services, expenditures, then you have your tourism. That tourism line right there is mostly due to the chamber contract where we reimburse them. They submit their marketing expenses the same way the convention center does. It's already paid for, it's a reimbursement, so then we go through it in our office, deem it, yes, this is a marketing or no, it isn't something, and then we have that conversation, then we turn around and pay them for those expenses. And you'll start to see those kick up around about May of this. You'll start to see those kick up. Then you have your debt service, principal, and interest in here. This is the tourism fund. We're very thankful that that tax got renewed. I'm very thankful for that. And you can see that the debt service principal is declining. So in 2019, we paid off another debt, so you can see that 3.3 principal dropped to 1.8. It is 1.8 again this year, and that debt will be going away very soon, which is great. So then you have your other financing sources, and you've got this, again, the legend is down there, and so you have your transfer to convention center, and you'll notice that's the marketing. So it's a transfer out here, go back to your convention center fund, you should have a transfer in of the exact same amount.
Jim, I have a question. Would you
Yes, sir.
scroll back up with the debt service? I know we dropped, our debt service dropped from 3.3 to 1.8, and that's what's budgeted for this year. And you said that will be going away soon?
January, so we have a June 1 payment and a December 1. Actually, it's at the end of December, 1st of January, and then that issue will be gone. Yay. 2022, January of 2022.
So the $1.8 million will come out of this as far as debt service. Will that be replaced with another debt?
We don't have any other debt issues for the tourism at this time.
But as we do, that will?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
As we go out for debt and those kind of things for other projects, if we do, that's where you will account for the payments there.
That's a great number, thank you.
Just to add a little bit to that, and Jamie has the exact numbers. I asked her the other day, where have we been with our debt over the last 20 years? And where have we been with it over the last 10 and then over the last 5? And we have made substantial progress in paying down our debt. Our goal is, what you just talked about, Larry, is to get our debt down to what we feel is a more manageable scope, and then to be able to be a little more responsible, is how I would put it, with when we go out for debt, making sure we have the revenue source to match the debt.
That is great, yes. So
That's our long-term goal.
if we could have that report sent to all the committee?
Sure, and so, you know that comprehensive annual financial report that we do every year after the audit? I want to say it's page 88, but I'll send it out to y'all separately so that you can see that. It's a debt ratio report, and it'll show you if it's TIF debt, if it's notes payable, special revenue, and it'll show you, and it's a 10-year span of time. We just completed it for this year's comprehensive annual financial report, so I'm going to send you out this year's. I believe it shows we've reduced since 2011, we've reduced the debt 99 million. So that's a pretty good gauge of what we're trying to do. And that is with adding that $12 million notes payable in 2017. So you'll be able to gauge that. It's separated out in columns, but I will send it out to you as soon as we're done here, just so you can look at it. And then feel free to call me or email me with questions.
That'd be
I'll help
great.
you define that.
Thank you.
Hey, Jamie, I know
Yes.
that that kind of corresponds with about the same time you've been director, and I know that has been a huge focus for you, and so I just want to commend you. I mean, that's amazing number, so great job to you and your department.
Thank you. We have a
lot of
great
work on
staff, and financial advisors help us out, and there's a couple of more issues that we could refinance and possibly drop some time and some additional debt off the end of that, but we're waiting until another, the safe S&P rating comes on board, but maybe next year we can look at to maybe reducing it some more, so thank you for noticing that. Okay, if there's no more questions there, transportation fund, again, this is your half cent. Most of what comes in there is your taxes, and you'll see a little bit of miscellaneous revenue here and there if you want to scroll down. We're at 1.4 versus 1.6 last year. Your expenditures are 630,000 versus 585 and 674 from the previous years. You can see we've tried to define that pretty well in the categories, MS4, garage, and streets, and so those are separated out in how we look at those. And just for your reference, how we define those is we have cost centers, we have funds and cost centers in our account categories, so that's how we determine those things. We also, yes, sir.
I'm sorry, can we
No,
scroll
it's
back
okay.
up just a little bit? So we're expecting that 25%. The revenues are up, well, we're probably even with our revenues. The expenses are down about 9% from what we budgeted. Am I reading that right?
On the, well, if you're looking at the 25% expectation, is that what you're doing?
I'm looking at the 16.2%. Yes,
The way it's pacing?
yes.
And that's a great question, and if you look at that, our expenditures for like garage and streets, they're not straight line across 12 months. Those fluctuate greatly, so you can look year over year and see that, but like, we may have a car break this month, and it may be very expensive, or a fire truck or something like that, that we didn't last year, and so we kind of try to gauge those anomalies, those trend breakers, and pull those out if we come across those.
Fair
Yeah.
enough, thank you.
Okay, well, unless there's any more questions, again, we put the legend down at the bottom, so that's your transportation fund. And if you want to keep going, we'll go to the TIF debt service. Again, this is all of our TIFs, and this is how we track the money coming in, the money going out. We have a trustee on every month that we send that money to, which pays down our debt. And okay, so that's what all the revenues are about, and then the expenditures. Right now, you're looking at your principal. That usually comes around June 1st, and some of them are December 1st. So you'll see that once we hit those months. And if you scroll down, you have those other financing sources. Most of those are transfer ins. So like I said before, with other funds, go to like where the general fund and the tourism, where all those monies come from, and you can draw that connection between the two. And then, if you want to keep moving, we'll move really quickly. I know I'm taking a little bit more time than I should. So, this is your debt service fund. This is one debt issue. It was the 2011 bond. We used to call this the Meadows bond. However, that Meadows TIF went away, so we still have that bond issue. We still keep that separate. And that's just that one debt issue, and the money's coming in to cover that cost.
And for clarity, Jimmy, when you say that TIF went away, did that get moved to another TIF?
So that was the Meadows TIF, and so it went away, I believe, in 2018. So we no longer capture those TIF revenues. However, we still capture them because there was that debt issue against that still had life on that debt. So that's how we still keep it separately, but we don't get all the monies coming in from like the county and those kind of things that were obligated as a result of the TIF. We don't get those, so we track it a little bit differently. And it's one debt issue, and that debt issue had been refinanced several times, and a portion of that was land, and a portion of that was the Meadows, and even a portion of that from years ago, I'm going back in my bank, but from years ago was even fire station, one of the fire stations, and we had paid that off, we had paid this off. The last portion of that is really the land for the landing, and so that's why we capture it the way we do. Did I answer your question?
No, but I'll go through this later.
Oh,
Thank you.
yes, I'm sorry. I'm
It's
sorry.
okay.
That TIF actually expired.
It did. The 23 years was gone. It ended in May of 2018.
Yeah, so we can discuss this later.
Yeah, sure.
So my question is, I know it expired in 18, but there was a remaining amount.
The debt service.
So where did that remaining amount?
So we still, those taxes that we still capture from that location, we still bring them in and transfer them out to pay that debt. So the Meadows and that whole portion, and you know what will be helpful? I'll send you a map of that district so that you can see those taxes that come in. We capture those and we still send them to the trustee to pay that debt.
Okay, thank you.
So it doesn't, typically when it goes away and we have no more debt, that would just be money for the general fund. It would be just regular sales tax. But because we still had a debt issue against that, we needed to still maintain it status quo to keep that debt and get it paid off.
So where is that tracked?
The 2011,
The remaining debt from the 2018, that remaining debt?
okay, so there was one bond issue, so that, I say the 2011, so I'm sorry. So that's a 2011 bond issue, but that is the one that is paid for by, back then was the TIF, the Meadows, the TIF. And it's all that district, that shopping center, and even some around there. And all the taxes coming in from that district, we still capture, and we send it over to this fund. so that we can still use this fund to pay that debt issues, debt service. And so if you'll see, Melissa, will you scroll up just a tad? You'll see the debt service principal there and the debt service interest. That is that one debt issue that still remains. And so we still capture those taxes. And what I mean by capture those is when they come in from the state, they're allocated in all those businesses. And so we have a filter. We capture those. We send those over to this fund in order to pay that one debt issue. If you'll look down at the bottom, and I can walk through this with you too. If you'll look down at the bottom, we have 3.3 in fund balance, and a large portion of that is a debt service reserve for the end of that. And I cannot remember the terms. I think this one is a longer debt that we need to look at shortening the life of. But typically when the TIF ends, what you would like to see or expect to see when it's properly arranged is that your debt issue does not go out beyond the life of that TIF. So a TIF is 23 years, and when you do a bonding issue against that TIF, you should want it to be less than that 23 years, so when the TIF goes away, so does the debt. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, but I know that, I believe I recently was explained that if it's a 23-year TIF, the revenues are not necessarily designed to pay that TIF off within that 23 years. And I'm going back to the Branson Hills TIF.
Back when that one was arranged, yes, because for the Hills and the Landing, there's a couple of debt issues against both of those that go beyond the life. So when they're arranging, when you're going out for debt service for those, and I wasn't here when those were done, but when you're going out for the debt service for those, you really should, the payments will be higher to get the, within the 23 years. But you really should look at it that way so that when that TIF goes away, the city doesn't have an extra financial burden on top of it. Because with the TIF, you're also getting the county's sending money to pay that. Some of the other districts are sending money to pay that. When the TIF ends, we no longer get some of that other district money, and we have to count on just the taxes from that district coming in to pay that. So when you're going out for another TIF, just as food for thought, it would be helpful when you're doing that bonding to capture it within that 23 years so you don't have those issues. Now, there's all kinds of ways to help get those down. There's refinances, which we've done quite a few of. You can shorten the life of that debt, and you can, as the interest rates improve, which they are right now, would be beneficial. As the interest rates improve, you can reduce some of that debt because of the interest and stuff there too. So that's one of the goals is there's about 3 or 4 debt issues that we have right now that go beyond the life of certain TIFs that we're looking at to try to shorten that life, if that makes sense, so that you don't have those issues when we get to the end of that TIF.
Yeah, those are big numbers. When I looked at
Yes.
Branson Hills and Branson Landing,
Yes.
the TIF ends and
Yes.
we still owe a huge
Yes,
bucket of
one of
money.
them goes out to 2034, I believe, and the TIF ends in 28. So, and we've already reduced a couple of years off of that one. So, but I talked to the financial advisor last week, and he assured us that, yeah, some of those are callable and we can look at those again. But we want to make sure that we don't hurt our credit ratings, so we want to follow what S&P has asked us to do.
Thank you.
And this is one of those issues of where when people hear me say we're going to be paying for the sins of our fathers for a while,
Yeah,
that's what we're talking about.
clearly. And those are big numbers.
They are, and anybody knows me have heard me say, well, when I took this job, I knew it was quite a bit of a dirt sandwich, but I didn't know quite how much of a dirt sandwich until we got into some of these issues where the TIFs, in my world, it's paramount that when the TIF expires, the debt should have been paid off.
That's exactly right, yeah.
And I'm not sure of what the intent was back then. I can't speak to that. I wasn't here, so there could be all kinds of other intents that I would hate to speak against. Rod, were you going to say
Well, I was
something?
going to say, with any TIF, always the sticky wicket, so to speak, is that, yeah, you want that to match up, but there's always assumptions made on activity and
That's
revenue
true.
stream. And if that does not materialize, then you could actually always be in that situation.
That's
So
true.
anytime you have this general conversation about TIF, that's always the,
Yeah, the difference here is, even with the anticipated revenue, it was designed to not be paid off.
Right, that is true. And like the landing, years and years ago, I had heard it say that the projections that were given to us as a city were way higher than what was originally coming in. And so then we had to look at that and do some refinances. It's a really good conversation to have.
so maybe the
Yeah.
thought was at that time it would overperform so much that it would take
Right,
care of it.
right. And now, the
Actually-
hills and the shops are doing well.
Branson Hills did way overperform their projections, but it was still designed to have a huge, tens of millions of dollars left over, even with their performance.
And that's why you have those high debt service reserves and those kind of things for the end.
Yep.
Some of them had like a balloon payment. Those are things that we're looking at, and we talk to our financial advisor even now on a monthly basis to try to look at that and find out what our options are.
Yeah, well, it's always prudent, anything you can restructure,
Absolutely,
alleviate that.
especially now when the interest rates are pretty good for us, so. Okay, we'll move on real quick. Capital Projects Fund. This is the fund that we track all of our capital projects in. We budget them. If we have some, and obviously y'all know that we didn't budget capital this year, and we're gonna take another look at that in July. But that's where we track these at. And we'll move on. The Perpetual Fund is just that one really small fund, and then you've got the Parks and Rec, that's the next biggest fund, and that is where we track all of our revenues coming in, all of the fees for the services and all of those things, and then your expenditures going out. I'm sorry, yes, sir.
Would you go back up to the other,
The perpetual,
no, the capital?
the capital, yes, sir.
So, and this is probably a Stan question. Stan, I know in our 2021, we budgeted $0 for capital improvements. Not long ago, we had that $72,000 expense. That would have been a capital expense.
Yes.
So, go
We were
ahead.
fortunate to have a reserve capital fund, and that's where that money's coming from.
Very nice.
And it was good financial management, shall we say. And now, again, to kind of expand on what Jamie said here, things are going good right now. That's why we're going to go back to our capital fund, because we've got some issues that we need to address. And if the funds are coming in appropriately, we're going to start working on that. So we'll be bringing it back to you all for approval.
Thank you.
And I believe that 72,000 was water sewer, and that is a separate capital fund, and you'll see that here in just a
Okay.
few minutes.
Thank you, Jamie.
And we are, as we said last year, we're gonna revisit in July once the audit is done for 2020 and it's been presented to everyone here. After that's done and that comprehensive annual financial report is complete, then in July, my staff and I are gonna take another look to see where we're at that point in time, to see what we can release and then bring it back to you all in the form of a budget amendment to help out some of these capital items.
Very nice.
Okay. So we'll move back on to the Parks and Rec Fund. And then, again, I already went through all of that. So this is your revenues at 342,000 versus 212. And then if you look at your expenditures, you're at 507 versus 454. Again, here's a transfer in from the general fund. That's that subsidy that we talked about. And we reduced that as a result of the pandemic. And then we did a transfer key down at the bottom there for you all as well. And a good gauge for that is your benchmark year over year, especially now because we're in March and we'll have the biggest amount of the sports and all those things coming during the summertime. Okay, so let's go to the Water Sewer Fund, Melissa, please. And then you've got the Water Sewer Fund 620. This is your operational for your water sewer. This is where the water revenues and the sewer revenues come in, and then where a large portion of your operational expenditures go out. And I also, here in a few items on the agenda, you'll see a consumption report, and that'll tell you if the water consumption, sewer consumption is down, irrigation consumption is down, and you'll be able to better gauge where those revenues are coming in. If you want to scroll up, and here, this is a proprietary fund, so All those others that I just explained to you are governmental funds, and we have to account for those differently than we do this water and sewer fund. You want to scroll down, yeah, and and then you'll see keep going. You'll see the transfer key down there, and as the unreserved fund balance, you'll see that says 65 million. However, a large portion of that is your assets that is held in that. So assets held in this fund, because it's a proprietary fund, you actually have around 4 million of unrestricted cash, and that is also in your comprehensive annual financial report. And when we're doing the budget, we split it out down at the bottom to show you what is restricted for assets in there versus what is unrestricted for use. So you'll be able to see that. But it's kind of if you look at that, you think, ooh, 65 million, it's not real. Most of those are assets, so.
Jim, I know those are reported in other places, but as we go through these reports, it would be beneficial to me if on a monthly reporting basis, when we show that unreserved fund balance, just a footnote, these are capital assets and these are unrestricted funds.
Sure, and we can do that here too, and I will draw your attention to the balance sheet where it also shows you that, so you can see that.
Yeah, it'll just be helpful as we go through this.
Absolutely,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, and then you have your capital. This is what I was talking about just a few minutes ago. Your water sewer capital fund, we have to keep that separate because this is a proprietary in nature versus the governmental funds in nature. So you have, actually the water sewer has two capital funds. 145 is paid for out of the tourism, the infrastructure piece of that. And then your 146 is operational. So that's capital. We typically refer to it as smaller capital items, not these great big large projects, that is paid for out of the water sewer operations. So just kind of, when you look at these, kind of just think about it in that way. And then if you scroll down, and we just did that budget amendment and that emergency purchase for water sewer, and we've got a few more to talk about today, lift station pumps and those kind of things, and those will also come out of some of the reserve for these capital funds, okay? Okay, and then we'll just keep moving to the internal service funds, and these internal service funds are really funds for equipment and maintenance and your vehicles. And what we do is we transfer monies from those operating funds, whether it be your general fund, whether it be parks does it, water sewer, public works, those kind of things. We transfer money over to these specified internal service funds for maintenance of vehicles, for vehicle lease payments, for these capital items that are smaller in nature but that need to be. And when we finish with our capital improvements program, the 5 and 10 year, you'll be able to see that the internal service fund should correlate with that. So you never have to beg for capital dollars because you'll know that it's planned for ahead of time. It's going to take us a little bit, but we're working on that. That's what those internal service funds are for. You'll see you have one for public safety, for parks, for transportation, all of those. And we've tried to, all of those at the end of the year for audit purposes, all of the internal service funds, they are proprietary and they roll all up into one internal service fund. So we'll walk through that when we're done, and that is in the comprehensive annual financial report as well. But you'll see on the proprietary schedule that there's one that says internal service fund, and all of those roll up into one at the year end for accounting purposes, just so that you're aware of that. Okay. If there's no other questions, we'll keep moving real quick. The operating fund balance, this is what I've referred to many times as our Bob Simmons report. This is your cash by fund. Melissa, can you pull that one up, please? Thank you. And so this was created back in 2008. This is meant to show you that the cash we're reporting to you in the fund balance we actually have in the bank accounted for, whether it be in investments or cash, those kind of things. So you'll see one for operating fund, you'll see one for tourism, and you'll also see one for the public safety. And I always say this, and I'm going to say this again, this is one of the ways that you can check us. So your income statements, the ones that we just got through, should tie back to your balance sheet. Your fund balances should match. There's two caveats: the general fund, because you have some minor funds rolled up in that, specifically your court and your safety fund. Those two are accounted for there, and I can go through those with y'all if y'all want. And then the public safety has about 3 minor funds in that as well, and that will be the difference. So those 2 fund balances should tie on every fund for every other purpose. And then you can use this cash by fund report to look at the cash and go back over to your balance sheet, and the cash that we're reporting to you on your balance sheet should tie back to that as well. So that is kind of a way that you can take all of the 3 major financial reports that we give you and tie them all back together. If they don't tie, come back and ask us, because they should.
Just stop a minute, so there's that 7.198, so if you're going
Yes.
the other direction, you'd be able to.
And then if you look at that 7.198, you should be able to go back to your general fund on the cash by fund. Okay, can you pull that cash by fund back up real quick? 7.198. That's how you tie that back to your balance sheet. And then you look at the fund balance to tie the income statement back. So that's an additional way to check us on those financial reports. I'd rather have questions than no questions. Okay, so then we have all of those balance sheets, and then I wanted to show you, Melissa, if you can go to, I am looking at, okay. If you can go to the water sewer balance sheet. This might be too much detail. I'm trying not to do that. Okay, well, just let's skip that, and then I'll go through it again. I'm trying to do too much detail. I'm sorry. Okay, let's keep going. That's the end of my financial reports. If you have any questions about all that information, please come and sit down with me, talk to me. I'll be glad to set aside time and go through it. If y'all want me to present it differently too, just let me know. Okay, so then the next reports are your business and liquor license reports. And really, we just give y'all this for informational purposes as where we're at this point in time. Some of the other things that the finance department handles is your business license, your purchasing program, what bids we've sent out, your liquor license, and we had a discussion about the business license classifications last time. We did add that column in so you can see what are actual new businesses versus what are actual businesses that are just transferred ownership and those kind of things to give you a better gauge of how that works. And so you've got the business license, you've got the liquor license, and you've got your purchasing, and then after that, you also have your water and sewer consumption reports, because that billing and all the revenue and those kind of things are in this finance office too. And so we give you a 2 and 3 year comparison on these so that you can look and see how we are doing with consumption and those kind of things as well. And I'm sorry for taking so much time on that, but I wanted to kind of give you a little bit more detail. Okay? And that is the end of that report as well. What's next on the agenda, Melissa? I can't see it, I'm sorry.
It should be the disbursements.
What about, is that before or after the public safety discussion? I don't have the agenda in front of me. I'm sorry, it's hard to get back to.
We do have the public safety and then the disbursements.
Then disbursements after that, okay. Okay, if there are no other questions, I'll just move right back into that public safety, if that's okay with y'all. And the only reason why we're doing this, because we've been asked a lot of questions about the public safety, and I want to make sure that everybody understands what we're doing and why. So I said I would go into a little bit more detail. This is, when you look at the public safety fund, you see 260, you see 262, and you see 263. 260 is that special revenue fund number. So there's different types of funds, and we'll get into that later, but there are different types of funds. And if you have a special revenue, it's a special revenue fund, and so we have to count for that very specifically. So this public safety fund, we call it as our 260 fund. Well, internally, we've also split that with 262 being your police and 263 being your fire, so that we can track those and look at the trends of those as well. So that's what 260, 262, and 263 mean. It'll also show you the expenditures and the capital and all those things separately, but at the end of the year, because it's one special revenue, we have to roll it all back up into one, similar that we had to with the 601, the internal service funds. So that's why we do it in that manner. So then the way you see it is you'll see all of them rolled up into one, and you'll see the taxes and franchises coming in, which is your half cent, and then your interest income and your investments, and then all of your expenditures going out. The one issue with this one, if you recall, I said that the fund balance should tie back to your balance sheet, but on this one, because there's minor funds rolled up into that, you'll be off by that minor fund. But those minor funds are police funds, and you've got the post fund, which is your commissioned officer training fund. You've got your inmate security fund. You've got your police training fund, your canine fund, your forfeiture fund, and that we talked about the other night. And so all of those funds are wrapped up into this, and there's about $138,000 in those minor funds that also get rolled up into this fund. And those are special uses. There's like, for the post, there's $1 per a specific ticket that goes into there. Inmate security, I believe there's $2 for specific tickets that go into there as well. And so we have all of those special definitions and how we have to track those. So that's what those minor funds are for. The post, again, that's training for those commissions officers. Jeff, if I misspeak, you let me know, okay? And then your police training fund, that is training, specialized training for any of the people in the police department. And then you have your inmate security, and then your canine. And your canine is basically donation-based. There's about $11,000 in that canine fund, and we use that if we're gonna like buy another dog or something large out of that, so that we used to pay for the food and all of that for that, but since it's donation-based, that's really more operational in nature, so we just kind of accumulate that. So that's how those minor funds are accounted for. And then those expenditures, you can see the police of 1.5 million, and then you can see, Melissa, can you scroll up for me? Then you can see the fire department, and you can see all of those. And then if you look down, you also have that internal service fund for the fire. We allocated through budget that $500,000 to go to the internal service fund because we're trying to build up enough money for another fire truck. So that's what that $500,000 was earmarked for. That $250,000 is for more vehicles for the police department. So we have that enterprise contract that we do for the leased vehicles, and those roll through, and we pay for the full piece of that vehicle out of the operational fund, and then we roll it to the internal service fund and just pay the lease payments for that out of the internal service fund. So the life of that vehicle's 3 years, and then they roll through it and get new vehicles every 3 years. That's how that works. And then, again, I already explained the code enforcement, but I'll be glad to elaborate on that if you need me to. And then the transfer in from the general fund. That transfer in was $7.6 million. That was based off the budgeted funds from 2017, and we added both of those together back then, and that's where that $7.6 million came from, so that we would not take away from the tax. The tax was supposed to be in addition to where we were at that given point in time, and so that's why we do what we do. Now you look at the unreserved fund balance, and you see there's $6 million in there. So we've accumulated monies in there because of last year, we did not do capital. This year, we eliminated some of that. So once we reassess all those financials, you'll see some of that start to open back up if it's all approved for and everything's accounted for through the board. That's really like how we want to take care of that. And so I don't know specifically what your all questions are specifically for that, but if you have any, I'm happy to answer those right off the cuff if I can. If not, Jeff and Ted are here. I'll put them on the spot too.
Put them on the spot.
Oh, and Crystal and Haley are here to help them back them up too.
What what I've heard, I continue to hear questions from our community about the Oversight Committee for the Public Safety Tax. And when I raised this question previously, and I won't go through the history of discovery, but it was brought to my attention that it is this committee that is responsible for the oversight of this fund. What I am planning on doing is, I'm planning on creating, haven't worked out the details yet, I'm working with Stan, but I'm wanting to put a subcommittee together for just the public safety tax. When the tourism tax was up for the vote, I got asked this question an awful lot. And I am so tickled pink that tax passed at such a high margin, 75% or something. But as I was touting that tourism tax, the public safety tax oversight kept coming up. So I haven't finalized all the details, and I'll probably I'll work with Stan and probably bring it up at the next meeting. But what we just went through, and I understand there's a lot to go through, and when we have our scheduled meetings, we've got to go through. But I don't know, those that are asking, I guess they're just not comfortable with what we just went through would be considered an oversight.
Okay, one other thing, and I was asked this a couple of times during the tourism tax, so I think I might know where you're getting at, but correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm okay with that, totally. But we had a report, and we've tracked all of the bigger, larger purchases that we've made since the inception of the public safety tax, because we had gotten that from a couple of other members of the society during the tourism tax. So one of the things that I should have said, and I've got this list here, and I don't mind sending it out to you all as well either, but if it helps, it's all y'all's decision. We're happy to do what y'all want us to do, but I want to go through this real quick, and y'all stop me at any point in time if you have questions. So what we've done since the inception of the public safety tax, fire positions, we had 3 SAFER grant employees that were going off that we just brought in as our own employees. So we had 3 of those employees, also 3 new positions due to a restructure we did in fire, and a fire marshal position. So those were new positions for the fire department. And then police positions, we had a CSI officer, 2 SRO officers, 5 new officers, a training and recruitment officer, and 2 animal controls. And the reason why I say that is because one of the largest expenses, and most of you all are aware of this, is personnel, right? It's huge. And so when we add all of those positions, that is a good chunk of change. So those new officers on an annual basis added more than $700,000 to the bottom line of the ongoing operations. And the new fire positions added more than $500,000. So that's just with the new positions alone, that's 1.2 of an increase over and above what we already had. And so then we looked at the dispatchers, which was greatly needed. We were able to look at the dispatcher's salary and increase those, and that's an additional almost $90,000 there on top of the operations that we already had. And then we did that radio system, and that was almost 1.2 million. And then we did a new fire truck, which was a little bit more than $1 million. And we were able to do the land for the fire department and for the police department, and both of those, one was $948 and the other one was $350. And then we had the 14 new vehicles since the inception of that tax. All total, that's about $5.2 million. Those are big ticket items, and we separate those just so that you can have those. That's a report I created and sent to some of the other people who asked. We had that for years going, and we've just added to it over time so that it would be informative. If that's something that you want me to publish with this report, we can do that. I was trying to gauge what else that y'all wanted me to do on top of what we were already doing that would be helpful so that you could see what we're doing with that public safety tax. If that's helpful, I don't mind publishing that. If it's not helpful, y'all just let me know what y'all want to see. We're happy to give it to you. It's not a problem. It's just a reorganization or a reformat of a report. Might take us a little bit of time, but we'll get there eventually.
Well, generally, my general response would be more information is going to be better than less. So if we have it, let's share it. But I know, and we don't have time right now because there was just many questions, but one specifically, I just heard what you said, but I was asked specifically about our police. And I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but I think our capacity, we're looking at 45 officers or something, and we're down 10 or 12. But regarding the public safety tax, and I just heard you say the words, the public safety tax included the salaries to hire 5 new officers. Well, for other reasons, we haven't hired those officers. So here's the monies that have been allocated and funded.
Sure.
And so I just think it'll be healthy to have some clarity on some of this.
That's why your fund balance is high, because what you don't spend drops down into that fund balance. So if you look at, you got a $6 million fund balance in there, but that's because there's a large portion of, they have unfilled positions on top of the new positions. I believe, I had a conversation with one of them this morning, that they don't have all their positions filled. So if you don't spend that money, it drops back down into your fund balance. And that's why, large in part, that your fund balance is higher than what we would typically expect to see, because you have open positions and those kind of things, and that's where that money goes.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
So maybe in the legend on that sheet,
Okay.
you know, if you got the large balance, maybe you put in there, you know, so much of this is allocated towards hiring 5 new police officers or whatever.
so, and we can certainly do that, because if you look, there's that budgeted column at the bottom, your unreserved fund balance, after all your budget, which that budget assumes those positions filled, except for the 5 that were frozen at the 21 due to the pandemic. We had some frozen positions, okay? So if you look, what you should expect to see at the end of the year is that 4.7, and now you're looking at a $6 million. So yes, we can determine what the cost of those would be and just kind of itemize that for y'all if you want. That's fine. We can maybe have that for you for the next time. And again, it's like this legend. If it's not helpful, just let us know. We'll bring it to you, and if it's what you want, great. And if it's not, we'll just keep working on it until we get there.
So part of this journey then for additional staffing, I think I understand this. It's terribly difficult to recruit people right now, so that is an issue. Yeah. So even though we are net lower than what we want to be, it's what can we do if we have the funding to get where we want to go. So.
And Jamie, one thing I might want to ask, because part of my past was supporting the new police station, and I attended several council meetings to that effect. Maybe we can have a line item on where that stepping stone is headed. I know COVID stopped it in its tracks.
For the new station?
But like there's engineering and backup stuff that has to be going on, and
So
maybe
like a timeline or an
something. It's just,
estimated timeline?
it's just not in the discussion. I think it needs to be in the discussion.
Just for your all's edification, I'll tell you this real quick. We had hired our architect. He did the, yeah. So we had that. We had to put him basically on hold because of COVID. He has since sent us a notice that he appreciates where we are, and he wanted to release us from our contract from him, which is fine. We'll go back out to bid for another architect. We're going to, because of COVID, we're going to maybe, the plan was we were going to have one architect do both of these that designed and built fire stations and police stations. We want to get our fire station done down in Ward 3. That has been on my heart for a long time because I am a fireman also, and I think we need better protection, fire protection down there. So we're going to try to go out and find an architect for that fire station locally. hopefully, that someone that we can get moving at a reasonable cost. We have to go out for RFQ, we get the proposals back, and then we're allowed to negotiate with them, so it's kind of difficult on pricing. But our goal is hopefully, with the money that we have coming in, to get moving on that fire station. That fire truck, where you're seeing us set aside the $500,000, will be for that fire station. And then when we get that fire station built, this is the other side that Jamie is kind of cringing about. We are going to have to hire 10 to 12 new firemen. So that will be another expense.
At least $1 million ongoing operational, so we have that to overcome as well.
Yeah, and it'll also be interesting to see, just based on what the cost that's gonna be compared to what. Yeah,
It's killing me
crazy,
right now. It's killing me right now because of the cost of construction products. Lumber is insane.
Ted, did you have a comment?
Sorry, inside joke. Mayor, just one quick comment for you, past, present, future, with Mr. Gass and his crew, Alderman Gaines and a few others served on that. That was truly more in line with being a PAC, a Public Action Committee. That was not appointed by this board or this mayor. It was a group of volunteers that had the opportunity to say, please vote yes for the initiative for this reason, where city employees could only say, we see a needs to build a fire station, build a police station, add staff. So there was not necessarily, to that point, true oversight in that PAC. Your oversight truly is, we prepare a budget based on guidance from finance and administrators. We prepare that budget, we take it through priority-based budgeting, which is a big format for our city. That goes before this board here. It goes before Board of Aldermen. All of our expenditures are tracked. We can show you a spreadsheet of every dollar I spend in the fire department and the police department as well with Chief Matthews. Back to the credit of these two ladies here. So the oversight is present in about 4 or 5 levels every day for what we do. The most important message, to your point, is that we get that out. Jamie she had the document ready and just went through it. Melody is able to get that message out to the public. We get it back to the PAC. We get it out through our media releases. The fact that we've hired personnel, we've added the fleet, we've got the land purchase. So you see the successes of what we promised back to citizens. Are we delayed because of COVID on building? Absolutely. That's any business in this town. But I just wanted to share with you the value of the PAC and the citizens that were engaged with us originally, and the oversight that we have today.
Okay, with all due respect, I've heard several times, and I just heard it again, that this oversight goes through 4 or 5 committees. So how much more oversight do we need? I'm calling baloney on that. There is not 4 or 5 committees that goes through our public oversight for the public safety tax, period. I can't think of one committee, including this one, that goes through an oversight for our public safety tax. I've heard from several. It goes through 4 or 5. I think, and I don't want to put you on the spot and ask you who those 4 or 5 are. What I'm saying is, from the public, what I heard loud and clear is they feel that there is no oversight. When I mentioned we go through public, when it was told to me that this committee goes through public oversight, in my opinion, what we go through at this committee level, and I'm not saying it's not important, I'm just saying it doesn't satisfy oversight. We receive high-level figures from Jamie. We spend 10 minutes going through that at this board level, and I don't think that is oversight. I can't tell you how many times I was asked on the campaign trail, How are we doing with our fire department? How are we doing? How's it coming along? I know we had a COVID delay. Where does it stand? Where does it stand? I will agree with something that you did say. Communication is probably the lion's share of this. But when I'm asking people to vote for the tourism tax because we need it, and I get asked the questions, okay, you're asking us to pay this. When we approved the public safety tax, we didn't get what we were promised. Now, that comment is probably based on lack of communication. So I want to dramatically increase our communication to our community of where we stand. I'm guessing there's people in this room that get asked the question regularly, how's our fire department doing? I couldn't agree with Stan more. That is so important. There's a lot of need for that. So, and I know there's the PAC. PAC admitted to me, I mean, not admitted, they explained to me that they do no financial oversight. They do no oversight except for the drawings and things for the fire station. So what my intention is I just want to set up a separate, and it can be either part of this committee, it can be a mayor-appointed committee, it can be an alderman-appointed, but I'm just looking at getting, having a separate entity provide the oversight that the community is asking for. Chief?
I think what the confusion right now, you used the word committee. I think what the fire chief was saying and what I will tell you is this fund balance goes through the same scrutiny as every other departmental fund balance when we're setting our budget, going through priority-based budgeting, coming to this committee, and then ultimately the board. But it's not a committee. It's the process that the city goes through on each and every fund balance. So it's not 4 levels of committees.
Right, it's 4 levels of review. So, again, we are happy to do whatever. If you want to see something different, or you want to set up another committee, or you want to have some oversight, let me know how you want us to define that and what that means exactly. What does it mean for oversight of this tax? Does it mean you want a line item description of every dollar spent? Does it mean you want different categories set up? This is the way we have to account for it for government finance, for proprietary funds. It's completely separate, and how we have to track it based on my profession. But if we need to break it down, it'll take us a little bit more work. But if it will resolve that, we're happy to do it. I just need, I'm not understanding exactly what I need to do to make it better.
Yep.
So if I could have that a little bit more defined, we're happy to do it. We don't have anything to hide, so we're glad to resolve all of this if we need to. Just let me know really, an idea of what y'all want to see, and I'll put something together and we can talk back and forth. And if it's not really what you're looking for, we'll do something different. I don't have any problem with that at all.
Okay, and we'll have discussions and create something. Thank you.
So that was really just the breakdown of the public safety, and I appreciate the 2 chiefs coming up here and helping with the definition of that too. So if we want to, I don't remember, I'm so sorry. I don't remember what's next on the agenda, and I don't have it in front of me. Can you pull it up? Is it disbursements? Okay. Thank you, whoever said that. Okay, so here's your disbursements. We give a description and we give you the dollar value, anything over 15,000. That is for you. If you have any questions regarding that, just let me know. The way that works is we budget all those expenses, we go through those at budget time, and then once those expenses and those actually occur, then we also bring you the list of what's expended by year over a certain dollar amount, and we've recently reduced that. It used to be 25 and we reduced it to 15. So that's just a line item view. If you'll scroll back up, I'm sorry. That's a line item view of what those expenses are for the month of March. If you have any questions And then I will need approval of those as well once y'all are done.
Jimmy, would you just briefly share with us on the fountain and maintenance for HCW? With COVID changes, there was some adjustments to, I believe, the lease agreement about how much either HCW is going to be paying for certain things and how much, and we took over something, fountains were in those discussions.
Sure. Well, I don't know that we changed it for COVID. I will tell you that we have changed it in the last couple of years. We have a fountain maintenance and we have a regular maintenance out there, and they were agreements. And the regular maintenance one, I'm pulling it out of my memory, so started off being $115,000, and then the fountain started off being, I believe, about $325,000, and so that was for the maintenance of the fountain, for us to reimburse them for that. And we started off doing reimbursements, and so they would spend the monies, and then we would get them back in, and then we would track them and reimburse, typically the way we do the marketing and all of those kind of things. So we would have oversight of the reimbursements and how all of that worked. And then throughout the years, and I can't remember when we changed that. Sunday, do you remember? Was it 2018? 2018, we changed the agreement to be, okay, well, here is a set amount that we think you're going to spend, and we divided that by 12, and so now they get that to reduce some of the paperwork. There was so much there, so that went all through the board, and we changed the agreement and how we reimburse them for those dollars. But the idea still remains the same. The maintenance grows and the fountain grew by the CPI and how that changed. And so that's really what that is in a nutshell. It started off being around $425 total for both of them in a month, and then just grew over the years by the CPI, and that's where it remains today. So that's how we work that.
I was just thinking that in the last 12 months, was there a?
Not to my knowledge. We
Okay.
haven't changed that agreement in the last 12 months. We did a couple of other ones, but not this one, I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
I'll double check just to reassure myself, but I believe that was altered in 2018, but I'll double check.
Okay, thank you.
If I recall correctly, I think and I'm trying to remember this, it did involve COVID. We were paying the fountain, and the HCW was paying something to us, and I can't remember what it was.
So those are two separate things. So HCW pays the $450,000, and that's the lease payment. And so we get a portion of that in January, and then another portion of that at the end of April. And those two, that's revenue coming in for us. It's about $450,000. And then we turn around through those maintenance agreement and pay them out pretty close to the same thing if you combine those two, fountain maintenance and building maintenance. So we've done that since I've been here. It started about I've been here since 2008, started I think 2007. But it's really an inflow and then an outflow.
Okay. And Stan, I guess I was thinking the same thing.
I think that's what, if I remember correct, because it was a wash.
Yeah,
And-
essentially.
Because we were both cash-strapped, shall we say.
Yeah, okay,
We worked on that. But
thank you.
again, this is honestly one of those, again, back to sins of our fathers.
Yeah, I mean, to my knowledge, it hasn't changed. It's just, that's how we have to capture it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second.
Need a roll call vote?
Melissa?
Buckley,
Yes?
Denham. Yes. Dobbins,
Yes,
Melton,
Yes.
Pinkley,
Yes.
Romine,
Yes.
Yancey.
Yes.
Right, the motion is carried.
Will you bring the agenda? We're working with that new software here, so we'll get it. It's taking us a little bit extra time. I think the next thing on is that project status report, if I recall.
Budget amendments.
Okay, so we can go through those really quick, because I have, one of those that the board has already seen is the Celebrite. So we'll go through the Moshwin, the exhibit number 3. And I'm going to paraphrase, and I'll go through them with you. If you have any questions, I can try to answer them, or the police station is here as well. The motion, just to paraphrase on my behalf, is for better radio connectivity with all the surrounding areas. How about that? Is that paraphrased okay? And Stan?
It allows us to attach to the state radio system where we can communicate during emergencies with any agency throughout the region on both police and fire.
And that's $27,000 budget amendment that we'll be bringing before the board as well.
So the administrator was correct. It allows interoperability with all of the agencies that we partner with. But the critical aspect of that is, right now, Taney County and Branson are the two public safety 911 systems in the county. We are their backup and they're our backup. We can't talk to each other right now. So it's critical that we.
So really, my paraphrasing was correct.
And Chief, before you sit down, and I think I asked this before, I know that's between Taney County and the city of Branson. Any discussions with, including Hollister?
So we met with the sheriff, all of the police chiefs met with the sheriff the other day, and we had a discussion at our level about trying to form a regional communications center, if that's what you're going
Yes.
for. Everybody that was at the table with the sheriff said it's a great idea. Now it's a discussion point above our heads.
We, again, it hasn't gotten to my desk yet, but basically we're going to have a discussion about how to pay for it. It was brought forth, I apologize, 2015 maybe. The voters decided they did not wish a tax to fund it at that time. The key is there are two actual PSAPs, Branson and Taney County. Hollister is still on they're on the county's radio system, if I recall correctly. They do not have a dispatcher full-time. They have some that work that aren't a true PSAP, so to speak. They don't really answer the 911 system. Again, I truly believe that in our region, it would be really intelligent of us to join together, because then we would all share in the cost, and we would also have the better communication that we need. So when it gets to my level, we'll start the fight again. And I hopefully will be able to educate the community on why it is extremely critical to, it's becoming so costly for the individual agency that it only makes sense.
Sure.
Secondly, I would say that one of the things, since we're talking about the public safety sales tax, that radio system was one of the things we promised to our community, and we bought it, and the radios, Motorola's done great, and this will also get to upgrade our equipment through that, and that will make it better for the communication. It'll make it easier for them to link.
Yeah, and I was thinking, thank you, Stan, I was thinking of the cost savings for all. For our neighbor next door not to have a full-time 911 operator doesn't feel good. And then for the general, when you look at the big picture, a catastrophe, right? To have all these entities on the same communication.
Absolutely, and you're seeing, quite frankly, and you all know I'm not from here, but it's something that we saw in the Kansas City region. We are going to have to rely on one another more and more for personnel. And these events don't stop at city limit lines.
That's right.
So it's very much like the training. Just to make this as simple as possible, that's why our police department now trains with the highway patrol, the sheriff's department, the fire departments, and our ambulance district for events at a school. Because no agency in this region, except probably us, has the manpower capable on duty to handle an active shooter situation at a school. So we'll be there. We've got to train together. We should be able to communicate together. So this is critical.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I could, one last thing about the motion that we're asking for here. It's a state project. The state needed a repeater tower so we could cover the southern part of our city. The reason this was not budgeted is because the state didn't know when they would acquire tower leases and things like that. They told us, 3 months ago? We got the tower for you.
Yeah, no, I'm very supportive of this. I just wanted to see if we could expand it. Thank you.
And that budget amendment, it'll come out of that reserve, and we'll present it before the board as well. So you should have that. The next one is the rifle program, the patrol rifle program. And that is a program that was in the budget last year, and it's really a pass-through. We buy the program, and then the staff turns around and pays us over a 12 period of time out of their payroll. So they get to buy those personal rifles, and they turn around and they pay for it themselves out of their payroll deduction over a 12-year period. So essentially, you're going to put that $40,000 back on the books, but it'll be a wash, really, once that 12 months is ended, if that makes sense. But it's going to cross years. So if we started in May, it'll go to next May, and so it's crossing years. That's why we really need it, because it's not a zero budget item for 21. It'll be a zero budget item over a 12-month span of time, if that makes sense. So that's the rifle program for the police department.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay.
This is the first I've heard of this. So these are rifles above and beyond what is required to be utilized on duty. These are above and beyond their standard issue.
The system we have right now, we have Mini 14s in our patrol cars. Those are cited by whoever takes them to the range. So you drive the car in the morning, I drive the car in the evening, and I'm working off of your sites. This program allows us to individualize that rifle so that you're responsible for your own rifle and I'm responsible for my own rifle. So that we're working our own equipment. It's an industry standard. It puts us in a much better picture liability-wise, and it provides the officer confidence that they're working on the best equipment available.
No, I'm clearly supportive of that. What I'm hearing, and maybe I'm not hearing it right, is that the officers are going to reimburse for that expense.
The officer's going to pay the city back for that expense, yes, sir.
Yeah, and you are correct. They will have, the rifle will eventually belong to them. The department has standards and guidelines that the officer still has to qualify with that rifle. They will use it when they're on duty. They have to qualify with it. The ammunition that is provided for it will be standard ammunition. It is a system that basically, what Jeff said a moment ago, the critical part of this is that the Mini 14s, we take those to the range, you shoot it, you hand it to the next guy, he shoots it, and I will tell you that the target difference can be like this.
Sure, sure.
Where with a rifle of your own individually sighted to your eyesight, it is far safer, it's far more accurate, and the problem is, well, let's cut to brass tacks. The department can't afford to go out and buy 45 brand new, or 50 now, brand new rifles for each individual officer to set in a closet when they're not using it. But this allows the officer the opportunity to do it, solves the problem of the department from a liability standpoint, making sure that they all have a rifle that they have qualified with, and they have that target and the sight settings, and it goes as deep as we actually, those scores and the standards that Jeff's going to get to someday. I talk about CALEA a lot. CALEA is a mandated agency that accredits police departments. And this was one of their standards that if you have a rifle program, this is the preferred method of doing it because of the individual officer's eyesight and so forth.
Yeah, I completely support the accuracy of the officers, the liability, all the things that go along with that. What I'm struggling with is going back and charging the police officers to have this standard, what I think should be a standard issue, and charging them individually for something that we should provide them to perform their jobs effectively.
Sure, I understand. But we're not making them. This is a voluntary program, and it does become their weapon. They own it when they retire from the department or leave the department, it's theirs.
So if they choose not to participate, they will still have access to a rifle.
But they'll have access to a rifle that is not properly sighted.
The intent is, if this program goes through and you approve it and the board approves it, and we have an officer who doesn't want to purchase those Mini 14s, I'll work a deal and I'll get Remington 870 shotguns with slugs that we can put in the patrol car for those officers that don't choose to go to the rifle program. Let me put you at ease just a little bit. We have an alternative duty weapon program for rifles right now, policy restricted types, things like that, and officers are already carrying, some officers are already carrying their own patrol rifles. We're just trying to provide everybody the opportunity that wants to do this on a cost-effective method.
So what if somebody leaves before their rifle is paid for? Then we assume the cost of paying the remainder on that, what is the?
They will either purchase the rifle outright per the contract that they will sign with us, or we will prorate it and get the rifle back.
Is this something that, you said this is standard, why does police departments not purchase these for? I guess is it just because of the cost, or is there another reason?
Right, the $40,000 that you're looking at there, up there, that we're asking, is a $2,000 per rifle cost. So the rifle, the optics, the case, all of that stuff, we're limiting the officer to no more than $2,000. So if we did that for 58 staff at one time, it would be a multiple-year project for us to try to get that implemented so that we owned all the rifles.
Okay, I'm going to probably cross some funds with this question. We haven't spent the money for the 5 officers that have been allocated. Can we use some of our public safety funds that we haven't spent to satisfy this need so that the officers will have the tools they need and paid for out of our public safety tax?
So you mean buy them all outright without getting reimbursed for them? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying the money has fallen through.
It's in the reserve.
Yep.
So it's the same fund. It's in the reserve. So that would be a question. In a budget amendment, we would just pull it out of that reserve and make that cost. But it goes beyond me for his operational. That would be what.
Help me out, Mr. Administrator. From a controlling standpoint, I would prefer that much better, policy-wise.
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
Funding-wise, no, I can't. Funding-wise, it's y'all's decision.
The real issue is, this was something that the officers actually brought forward in the department. Secondly, we could, if we wanted to make that initial purchase, we could do it. We would have to find reductions in that budget until we got the fund built back up. Secondly, we would then have to also start setting aside money for replacement of these rifles on a regular rotation, just like we have to do with handguns. So it would become an ongoing and permanent expense for us.
Okay, and I'm going to go back to, and I'm not going to put anybody in a spot, but there had to have been a lot of money saved from us not filling our 5 officers that we have budgeted for out of the public safety tax. So that's money that was budgeted.
Okay.
Anything you want to
Sorry,
share?
go ahead. No, I will. I was just going to wait until you finished your comment.
Okay, so we have monies that were budgeted, that were not spent, that have fallen down to our reserves, and here's a need that I think this would, Chief, I think this should be standard issue, right? We want our officers to have the best tools for liability and protection and all those reasons. And I don't know that we need to go find the money
So really what you're looking at is that right now, if that fund balance is higher, then it makes it much simpler to make this decision, but it's all about sustainability at that point.
Sure.
As you move forward in the future and you look at revenue streams and cost of
It's,
programs.
ongoing versus one-time expenditures. So you hear me, that's essentially exactly what Mr. Roman is saying is those salaries are ongoing operational expense. This would be a one-time on a rotation. And what I asked him was, what is the life of one of those rifles?
Yeah.
Is it 3 years? Does it last 5 years? I don't know that answer off the top of my head, but that would be what we would have to consider to determine that one-time expense. So your reserve fund is made up, anything that you don't spend, we just talked about is the reserve, and that's 6 million. Now you have to remember, a portion of that goes to police and a portion of that is fires. And so we have that split out. And if y'all want to see the split out of those, we can provide that as well. So you have to understand that when you look at your ongoing operations, we have to maintain the ongoing operations and those one-time above those expenditures. And right now, if you look at the police department in long-term, you're on a downhill cycle for your expenditures, your ongoing expenditures to outpace your revenues. So that's something that we have to consider long-term. And so that's exactly what Stan was speaking to about finding the money and replacing it and all those, because that would be using ongoing monies to replace one-time expenditures, and it's going to change the way your revenues outpace your expenditures or vice versa. So that's something that, if that's something you wanted, we would need to look at it over a span of 5 years or so and look at how your revenues are gonna overcome your ongoing operations to make sure that that fund is stable and consistent. And that's really, I think, the entire concern.
Yep. So Chief, and I don't know what the life expectancy is, but if it's a rifle, our goal is for them not to shoot it except for target practice, right? But then it would be a city-owned rifle, so that could be transferred to the next officer coming in. And we don't need to get into the details, but since we've had the public safety tax funded and we haven't had those 5 officers, we've had the salaries, but not the officers. They're just round numbers. Over the course of the last couple of years, we had to have saved $500,000 or some significant number. So if we've saved $500,000, we're talking about a $100,000 purchase to arm our officers for standard issue. I'd sure like to see us do that.
And for me, I don't really care if that's what you all want, but you have to look at priority and those things. What's priority of the police department? What do we want to spend those one-time dollars on versus those ongoing monies? I'm just the finance person, but that's kind of the thing that you need to look at as far as that goes. And that's a conversation between Jeff and Stan and stuff, but for a financial oversight, really look at managing those ongoing operational costs and those one-times separately, because you should never use the one-time monies for ongoing, because, I mean, that'll change the way your trend looks 5 years from now. So that's something that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at all of these things, because I'm sure he's gonna wanna fill those positions, and the positions that they don't have filled right now, they're gonna want a full staff for that. Then they're also gonna want to give raises and take care of them, benefits and all those kind of things. So those are all things that we have to look at in the future.
Let's just,
So-
for the sake of time, we'll put together the opposite plan of what this is.
Yeah, let's postpone this.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Let's postpone this and have that further discussion.
So the only other question that's in my mind is, and I think you alluded to it, is as part of this, looking at it too, is if we get to the point where we're overthinking it too much, that overwhelmingly, if the officers say, you know what, I just soon have the program and own the gun anyway. So,
The administrator said that earlier.
alluded to that,
This
so-
was an officer's request.
yeah, so that's part of,
Right.
maybe
Right.
part of the
Sure.
complexity of this too.
Mr. Mayor,
So, yes.
I have a question for Chief Matthews. Is this a national program?
So there are iterations of this across the industry, yes, sir.
I've read a little bit about it, and a lot of communities are.
The little agency I came from had a very similar program. Right.
Thank you.
One clarification point. You talk about the 5 positions that are frozen. Those are authorized but unfunded in my 21 budget. So that money is not set aside in my 21 budget. Those positions are there, but they're just unfunded this year.
Okay, for clarity, I think, we have the funding for 5 officers just in our public safety tax, not including the funding that, in addition to those 5 that are named in the public safety tax, that are budgeted, they're just not filled. Is that right? I mean, if you found the officers right now to fill up, we have the funds for that.
All except for those 5 that are frozen as a result of the pandemic.
Okay,
Fair enough?
So that would be
Fair
another
enough.
budget amendment.
Yes, that would be a budget amendment. And that's one of those things that when I talk about July, we're going to reassess because it's
Yeah.
more than, I think every department or every, the whole city had, I think we had 22 positions that weren't filled at the time that we froze. So that's one of those items that we're going to bring back before you at the end of July, once we reassess the financials and talk about that as well. So it'd be like a big old budget amendment to get those things activated again and show you, if we do this, here's how the financials will set at the end of the year. That's that discussion. I know exactly what you're saying, and all of that is a result of the priority-based budgeting and how you do that. And so I'd be glad to sit down and talk with you in depth about it again. It's not a big problem for us. It's just knowing the direction that we need to take.
yep. So instead of moving forward with this,
Okay,
my recommendation is to postpone or table this until we can have these other discussions and then bring it back to this board.
do we want to, I'm just gonna ask a question, and I'm not sure exactly how to ask this, but for a sake of time, do we wanna push this forward and try to have that conversation sooner than later so we can get those rifles bid and done before too long? Because if we postpone it, it's going to shortchange our officers in that whole program that we're trying to do as a benefit. So
Stan?
what is your thoughts on that?
We'll get it done pretty quickly. I don't think it'll cause any major time issues.
So we just don't take it to the board yet? We
Right.
just, we have this conversation and then take it to the board maybe one
Yeah.
session later?
I mean, the
That's fine.
committee is now aware of this, and quite frankly, they wouldn't, they aren't the final, we are not the final answer. It's the board. So this gives us the opportunity. We'll get it done before it comes to the board.
Okay, so we'll look at maybe just pushing it
That work?
one meeting. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Ooh, we gotta hurry. Next one. Okay, the next one, Kendall, we have some utilities, because those were the police. Then we've got, we have a budget amendment for, is this the Dewey Bald one? The Dewey Bald water system, we went out for design, and we had a portion of that design done, and we now need the $25,841. That will come out of the reserves, but that is to complete the design. Where is, there you are. That is to complete the design there so that we can get moving with that water system infrastructure, so go ahead.
So in 2020, we had a contract with Algar Martin to design the Dewey Bald water system improvements. During 2020 with the COVID, we paused them due to budget concerns. So we held them off. So what this would do would restart that. It would finish to the design and also, so we originally planned on carrying over a little over 18,000 into 2021 as part of the leftover of the 2020 budget. But in addition, we, through that engineering, we had to do a cultural resource study, which had an additional $3,500. And then also we had an additional easement as well. And then with the change from the original contract, they also have an inflation in their operating expenses as well. So that came out to the $25,841.45 in order to proceed on with the final contract.
So that's another budget amendment that we will be taking before the board as well. And then,
Do you need a approval or a vote or anything on that?
no, this is just more informative.
Okay.
And then the next one is for the lift stations. Kendall, you want to explain that one as well?
So annually, we budget an amount of money to rebuild or replace our lift station pumps or plant pumps as well. And we do this on a 7-year rotation. And last year, we originally budgeted $132,000 for replacements. We keep a running list of pumps that are coming due. And of course, with COVID last year, we postponed it. But in August, we had to, there was 3 pumps that came to our attention that needed rebuild. And so we went forward with a budget amendment of the $49,826, which we was able to replace 2 pumps out of the 3, which left a remainder of the $32,000. That lift station 17 pump, which is what we're asking a new budget amendment on, we had to send it off for evaluation. So we sent it to the company, they take it apart, evaluate it, send us back a quote of whether, of how much it would cost to rebuild versus a price of a new pump. And so instead of our anticipated $32,000, it ended up being the $42,446. So we're asking for a budget amendment to make up the difference.
So
That
Kendall,
budget
is,
amendment- I'm sorry, go ahead.
Kendall, is that, I read that that's coming out of the water sewer internal service fund?
Yeah, the capital fund, 145 reserve.
Thank you.
And that's $10,446 for that one.
Do you need approval from the board or?
I think
take it?
these budget amendments are just informative. We like to bring
Great.
them before y'all so that, because it's financial oversight, so that y'all can just ask any questions and that we can move it forward. Just similar to the way we did the rifle program. It was a good
The real
conversation.
key to this is that we keep on top of this so we don't have that year where we get, uh-oh.
You bet.
So we don't have the massive expense.
The next one is one that I took to the board on Tuesday. It's the Celebrite. It's the budget amendment. I took it to the board for the sake of we needed to get it paid, but I wanted to bring it back before y'all so that y'all were informed about it as well. And this was a program that we started last year, and it was the equipment and the operational and the subscription with the Celebrite contract, and it was the Secret Service paid for it last year. We got notified this year that they would not continue the annual. It's $3,700, and then we're gonna pay for that, and then we'll budget for that annual ongoing cost in the budget going forward, now that we know that we have to pay for it instead of the Secret Service. And that was the one, we explained that Tuesday night, but I wanted to make sure that you all were aware of that one as well. And then there's 2 more. There was the one for the fire department's records management, and because this is the finance and capital committee, that is it's a capital change. It's a records management software that was being purchased this year, and essentially it's a grander scale, replacing what they had because what they had is no longer sufficient. And so because it's a new capital purchase, you won't see this one every year. It'll go on and be an ongoing cost for annual subscription. But we wanted to inform you of what was going on because it's a capital program that we didn't budget capital monies for. But what they were able to do is offset one expense with another. So this one is not really a budget amendment. This one is just informative to tell you what's going on here as well. And then the next one, I don't have a memo for you, but this one came up, and I wanted to explain this one to you as well so that we could get it purchased. The plotter printer went out upstairs, and it's a significant amount of money to get it fixed, and it just really doesn't make sense. The last time we bought a plotter was 2013. And it cost us almost $37,000 to replace at that point in time. Keith went out and got bids. It's going to cost us about, to replace, it's going to cost us about $9,995, but a $50 a month maintenance fee. So if you put all that together on an annual basis, it's less than $15,000. So, I mean, we're getting a new one for half the cost of what it cost us back in 2013, which is phenomenal. But we're almost completely out of use with that one upstairs, and that's how we do our maps and all of our big printers. So we're really needing to move forward with this at this time. It is less than a $15,000, so this one doesn't have to go to the board. But again, we want to inform y'all of the decisions and how we're going to pay for this. It'll have to come out of the reserve to do that, but we want to make sure that you all are aware of that moving forward so that we can move forward and purchase it and be ready for the big seasons coming up.
Jamie, just for clarity, I appreciate the cost being so much lower, but did I hear you say that we're not utilizing it or we're not going to need it? What was that comment?
We do need that plotter. He'll explain.
No, if we need it.
It's critical.
Yes, it's.
No, well then we.
I'm
don't-
sorry, if I said that, I meant we do need it. It's a critical piece,
Okay,
and we
I
need
just
it
heard that
sooner
different.
than later. Yeah.
Okay,
Good to go.
what's happened to our plotter upstairs is there's two pieces of the equipment. It's the plotter and the scanner. The scanner is completely quit now, and it's got an umbilical cord to the plotter, which has the main brain in it. The main brain to the scanner has went out, and it's gonna cost around $4,000 to fix it. We've already replaced 4 of the print heads, and they're right at imaging device, and they're about $3,000 each. And I hate to keep pouring more money into this old plotter. It's kind of like an old car. You don't want to put more money in if you don't have to. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, no, I'm very supportive. I just wanted to clarify.
So is the difference in cost just new technology, where they've driven the
Yeah,
cost
kinda
down,
like cell phones.
developments?
This is all one machine. It's a plotter,
Yeah,
scanner, device.
Yeah, every department in the city uses this.
And it's like a shift. It's like all of the way IT is going is to monthly and annual subscriptions instead of one outright cost. So that's the way this one's going.
And
as
it's
well.
direct purchase, not lease, so typically it's direct, with maintenance.
So I wanted to inform you of that one because I didn't get, well, he sent me the memo. I'm going to just be flat out honest, and I forgot to put it on this agenda. So I told him that I would talk about it in my director's report to make you all aware of it because that was my bad. I dropped that ball. Thanks. Okay, and I think, is there anything else, Melissa? Does that go to the director's report? Okay, so just, I'll be real brief about the director's report and just to simply say that we're in the middle of working on the audit as well. And so that will be coming to you, I think, around the June Finance Committee on how that audit is going. We're also, the American Rescue Plan, for those of you, we went to, several of us went to Jeff City to sit before the subcommittee that has been created. Let me read it because I forget the name of it. Subcommittee on Federal Stimulus Spending, and it's really the state's getting more than $2 billion on the American Rescue Plan Act. I refer to it as ARPA. And so they reached out to us through our lobbyist and said, we want municipalities to come and present needs because we have a lot of universities, but we don't have as many municipalities. Well, Kendall and Keith and myself and Stacy, we went up there and we spoke before this committee and we told them of basically the top 10 water sewer infrastructure needs, because my hope is that we get some of these big projects that are needed chopped off, and then we can use the money that we're earning here for other things. And so we presented them a memo after that fact and with the top 10s and explaining all of the projects. And the reason why we only held to water sewer was specifically but because water sewer infrastructure is named in the current document, and it is also broadband is also another bullet point. Nothing else was named, but we're watching it. We sit in on meetings on a weekly basis to see what's coming. But the Treasury will release the guidance on or before May 10th to know what specifics are there. I did ask the question, roads, streets, bridges, is those projects going to be included as well? They think maybe so, but again, they don't have the guidance yet. So, and they did say that the guidance was not going to be as restrictive. And so we're hopeful for that. So that memo that we sent lists the top 10 water sewer infrastructure projects so that they already know they can be thinking about stewing on what they're going to give to the city of Branson in an effort to do our water sewer projects. So that was what our hope was, and I think it went pretty well. We were one of 2 cities, and the other city was a smaller city that was there. Everybody else was a university. So hopefully we have a leg up on some of that other stuff. So once that money gets issued. Now, the city of Branson is being awarded. It changes all the time, but the last check was about $2.4 million over the life of 12 months. We'll get the first half in about 60 days, and we'll get the second half 12 months after that. So that's how kind of it's going to work right now, and I just want to let y'all know that.
On that 2.2 million, 2.4, where's that money, when we receive it? Are there restrictions on it? Where's that money going to go?
Well, right now, the guidance is not clear. So, but what we're doing in our department, we expect to have the guidance prior to getting the money, because the money, how it works and how it comes to us is based on population. So the city's less than 50,000 in population, the money will go to the state, and then the state will release it to us. So it's going to take us a bit longer to get the money than those with the population more than 50,000. So that's why I say around 60 days, because the states can file for an extension up to 120 days in order to give that money out. So we're just not sure how that's going to work yet, but we're setting a separate bank account and a separate fund, so when those monies come in, that's where it goes, so that we can track it, because we will have, we're gonna receive monies, anything over 750,000, they are special audits. There's a special single audit, there'll be a special federal audit for all this grant money, and we have to be responsible for making sure we dot all of our I's and cross our T's. So my preference is to set it aside in a special fund and a special bank account, so that what comes in goes right back out, and we have full plans for that. So that's one of those things that we're watching very closely, and every Friday and some Wednesdays we sit in on National League of Cities and MML and the GFOA. They also give us breakdowns, but so far in the last several weeks, it's all been the same thing. We're just kind of waiting at this point until Treasury releases that guidance. So that's how we're working that right now.
That's a great idea, having it in a separate account.
The short answer is, we don't know yet where we're going to spend it, because we don't know what they're going to let us spend it on.
What we're hearing is revenue loss is a big one. So those kind of things we just take into consideration, and we'll bring it back before y'all before anything. So.
Yeah. Thank you.
And that's really my report. If y'all want a copy of that memo that we sent out, I'll be glad to send that as well. Just didn't know if you were interested in that or not, but I will send that memo out to y'all as well if you want.
One last quick note for you all. We did receive communication from, you're going to have to help me with the acronym. Is it MHDC or GBH?
CDBG, Community Development
one.
Block Grant.
The $5 million grant that we've been waiting on. They said they finally got movement on that, and they expect us to receive a letter very shortly on awarding that $5 million for the Compton the Compton wall.
And then after that piece comes, then the additional $3 million through the economic development. They were just waiting on that big piece to come, and then they could issue that. So
That's excellent.
we're in hopes that that all comes to fruition very soon.
And
Stan, that would be a good acronym to remember.
CDBG.
And you have 2.75, I believe, on the agenda for May 11th, accepting for the wall as well.
And that's all comes into it. Then we only have about 3.6 to find to complete it due to the increasing cost.
Yeah.
But that's on this memo. That's on the memo that I submitted to the subcommittee, because I even talked about that one. We have all this other money. We just need this gap filled. So we're hopeful that they're thinking, oh, well, they've done their due diligence. We'll just give them the rest of the money. That's kind of our hopes.
Very nice, very nice.
That's my report. Thank you for reminding me of that. I forgot about that. Is there anything I'm missing? I think that's it.
Before we adjourn, I want to make a quick comment. Something I heard over and over and loud and clear on the campaign trail was our parks in Branson, quality of life for those that live and work here. I know through the years, our budgets have been real tight. I had one gentleman contact me about our skateboard park, and he had one question about a safety issue, and I've already run this by Cindy. But it's really run down, and as we were visiting with folks, boy, that was a common theme of, we do a lot of things for businesses and a lot of things for this and that, and many of them tied back to keeping the kids doing healthy activities, which will prevent them from having free time to doing things that we don't want them doing. And so what I'm going to be asking for is, I would like to ask Cindy Shook to dust off, I'm sure she has a list.
She does, she very much does.
And so that's something that's important to our community. And so I'd like, as we gather information on that, I would like us to be able to redirect some of our funds to.
Absolutely, and just so you know, I apologize, I don't know if you've read my email yet or not. On this afternoon, I have a meeting at 1:30 at the Chamber that Pam Yancey will be at also. And we have started working with the Chamber in an effort for them to help us raise funds for our youth sports and so forth. And we are hoping to help in costs for our parks as well as expanding our youth sports opportunities.
Yeah. So, primarily it is, we have a lot of deferred maintenance in our existing parks.
Amen.
So initially let's take care of the deferred maintenance, and let's look at what else could we include in our existing parks that'll increase the quality of life for those out there that are working for us.
On a personal note, I'm a mom of 3 and a very active little 9-year-old boy, and he will very much appreciate that, so.
You are one of many. Thank you. Or we could say we're doing it for you.
No, don't say that.
I have nothing else. Does anybody have any other comments?
I'd just like to thank you all. I know this takes time. I know we were here till midnight Monday. But all of you all, thank you for your commitment to the city, and thank you for helping us through this. It's really refreshing for me to sit up here and hear some of these things and ideas. Unfortunately, we work in this world, so we understand it, and we start talking and doing things inside of our blinders that the public doesn't necessarily understand. So it's good to get us back to center, and communication is so key.
It is.
So we're working on those issues. Jamie and I have sat down and had many long talks about debt, and I'm a real conservative guy. She's more conservative than I am. We kind of bicker back and forth on that, but getting our debt down to what I consider manageable, where we can not have to worry about, hey, what happens if, is so critical to the well-being of this community. So that is one of our focuses. I want you all to know that.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
And Jamie, just a reminder, if you send us out that information, that would be great to see.
I'll send one email, and it'll have that letter, that memo that I sent to the subcommittee, and it'll have that debt chart on it. And you'll also see that come out once the audit is published. So sure, I'll send that as soon as I get back to my office.
Any other comments? Take a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second?
Roll call vote, please.
Buckley,
Yes.
Denham. Yes. Dobbins.
Yes.
Milton.
Yes.
Pinkley.
Yes.
Romine.
Yes.
Yancey.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you all.